our industry is going to have to change. Let's be honest, in various iterations, Lloyd's have been trying to grapple with the modernisation at Lloyd's for as long as I can remember, certainly 15, 20 years. And it's not easy, but there is an acknowledgement, there's an acceptance it's going to have to change. It's going to have to drag itself forward into a new evolution.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this special recording of the Technology Boardroom podcast from Advania UK. Today, we have two very special guest appearances from two very experienced CIOs in the insurance sector. Now, I'm not going to steal their thunder and do any introductions, but this really session is to talk about how the role of a CIO is changing, how that use of technology is changing within specifically the insurance sector, but it's really going to be applicable to lots of other sectors as well. So even if you're not in the insurance sector, please listen on, because I think you'll find this really, really interesting and a really good session. So if I hand over to the guests, the people that are going to add all the context here, Steve, do you want to do a quick introduction?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name's Steve Jolley, and I'm not sure about very experienced, because that for me feels like I'm old, which yes, I guess I am. But nonetheless, CIO currently at Miller Insurance Services LLP, been there for just under 3 months now. Prior to that, did some consulting. Prior to that, I was at Tysers for 5 years, Ardonna, JLT. So yes, this is my fourth sort of big CIO role, I guess, really is the case. But actually, I've been in the insurance and in particular the London market industry for now well over 30 years. So yes, I guess I am old.
We'll not talk about age, because I seem to get called out about my age in every podcast for some strange reason. I don't know why. Thank you for that, Steve. Pete, do you want to follow on?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Great to be here and catching up with Peter and Steve. So I've been in insurance for about 25 years, working primarily not in the broking space, unlike Steve, but for the last 5 years or so, we've been sat in seats in different organizations, and have had some really good collaboration across technology between competitors, which I think is really healthy and really constructive. Prior to that, I've worked with Lloyd's syndicates, reinsurers, insurers, from the RSA and Avivas through to smaller carriers. So I've had quite a broad experience and exposure to the different approaches, the different types of technologies that are deployed, and I think it leads to quite an interesting sort of set of experiences. I think qualify yet as a market veteran. I can only aspire to get to Steve's level of experience, but I'm catching up fast.
Thank you for that. Well, you've led me neatly onto the first question, really, which is all about the changing role of the CIO. How have we seen it change over this period? Are we at one of those inflection points potentially where technology is changing so fast that the role of the CIO is changing ever more and ever more quickly? I don't know. Do one of you want to just take that thought and run with it to start with?
Yeah, sure. I don't mind going first on that. So I think, yes, the CIO role has evolved and is evolving and will continue to evolve. Yes, technology is changing at a really rapid pace, but so is the world, the social economic issues and alike. Therefore, actually running a business is evolving extremely quickly as well. What you did yesterday may not make you the money that you want to in order to achieve tomorrow's result. So I think for me, then, the CIO traditionally, I guess, was sort of almost perceived as the guy or girl that kept the lights on, kept the plumbing going, dare I say, the drummer of the band. Obviously, COVID hit, and that, I think, changed significantly, because we then, as a result, organizations across the world became extremely reliant on their technology. And dare I say, I'm not sure the CIO became the lead singer. That's the CEO and always will be. But maybe lead guitarist, if I keep going down that music analogy. And I'm also a huge advocate for talking about technology last, not first. I'm also a big fan of, it's not IT-led business, it's not business-led IT, it's in the middle. And our job, and that's where I think it is a challenging job, but is actually we're the ones that need to be at the forefront of technology. What's happening? What are the tools in our own toolkit? What are the tools that are out there that could be relevant and appropriate for our business or marketplace, as Pete and I will go into in a second? And how can we utilize those? How can we solve business problems, create business opportunities, grow our business, become more operationally efficient, stay out of jail, etc., etc.
Thoughts on that, Pete?
Yeah, so I just add on to it. I think I heard a quote recently. The pace of technology will never again be as slow as it is today in terms of technology change, and that's true. It's an ever increasing speed of innovation and new technology that's available to us. What's really interesting, though, in the environment that we operate in insurance, which is a very traditional market, I think it's a really challenging role, and as Steve highlighted there, the requirements have moved. They've shifted. The pandemic was a big catalyst to doing things differently, to technology assuming a slightly different position, a slightly different set of requirements within these businesses. Obviously, always been essential. Obviously, always been important, and technology is not telling the business what to do, but at the same time, more and more, the business can't do what they want to do. They can't achieve, they can't succeed without technology being in lockstep. So I think it's a really interesting balancing act, because all the points that Steve was making about keeping the lights on effectively, all the good stuff that needs to the foundational bits, the infrastructure, security, we don't need to deep dive into any of those, but those all have to be done. They're just sort of hygiene factors. They're not optional, but it's around how we can deploy technology to really help the businesses that we're supporting, and actually the wider market achieve its ambition.
Yeah, and if we head into the insurance market specifically at this point, and obviously, I've worked in IT for a long time. I've dealt with lots of insurance companies over that period of time, and have found that pieces of paper are still very important in the industry, probably more important than lots of other industries. Are we starting to see the end of that, or do we think that that's going to continue for some time in the way that people operate, the way that people reinsure things and such like? Is that going to still be using those pieces of paper for some time?
Pete, do you want to go first?
Yeah, let's jump into it. So, listen, the pandemic was an awful event for society, but in terms of a catalyst to change from a technology perspective, and specifically our addiction with paper in the insurance industry, I think it was very, it accelerated change that was necessary. We've been talking, digital is I don't say it's a buzzword. It's an important aspect, important focus that we've got taking forward. But to suggest that organizations have gone directly from being paper-based to being digital, it's quite a big leap. And I think it's not just about technology here. It's not just about how slick the printers were and how much was getting produced. It's about people, and it's about attitudes, and it's about process, and it's about embracing the technology that's available and understanding that just because you've been successful doing what you've been doing for the last 5, 10, heck, 45 years, there could be a better way. And in my opinion, there is a better way. And it doesn't need to involve paper. There are conversations that can take place. There are discussions, there are agreements, there are deals that can be done that don't need to be reliant on paper, which I think historically, particularly in the Lloyd's space, that's been very, very prevalent.
Yeah, just to add on that, Peter, if I can, Pete's absolutely right. It was a game changer, albeit if you pick into it a little bit. From a pre-buying sort of negotiation quote stage, we all felt, wow, here we go. There are some tools out there that will remain nameless, but people who know our industry know what they are. We all thought, here we go. And I, for one, for example, have been championing that component for years now. We thought that the adoption of that would accelerate. It did a little bit, but not a lot. Everyone just went into their bedrooms and just sent emails. But nonetheless, it's not paper, I guess. The other component to add for that, and that's, by the way, that's been still a continually evolving area. And I am excited that things are really starting to take traction from a pre-bind perspective. A couple of things to point for me. One, our industry, especially in the complex side of things, the specialty retail wholesale bit, the low volume, high value stuff. Our industry is complex, and that has its advantages and its disadvantages. But in regard to that component, relationships are really, really important, especially on the broker side, obviously on the underwriter side as well. We have a marketplace. I'm super proud to work in it. And sometimes people outside in look in think, wow, how can you not go faster? Well, actually, because of the ecosystem that our industry that's been around for 350 plus years is, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not, but nonetheless, it's very relationship based. So what we've got to do, I guess, as technologists is how do we make their jobs better? How do we make them more efficient? How do we enable them and our respective companies scale and not scale with the operational costs going at the same level as revenue? Because that doesn't work because you're no bigger from an EBITDA perspective. So digital has to play a part, being data driven has to play a part. And that's why, back to my original point, that, CIOs, CTOs play an ever increasing part in the boardroom as regards to, if we want to be, say, 3x, 5x growth in the next 5 years, that's great putting a number. And then you think about organic, you think about strategic hires, you think about M&A. So if I park the M&A to one side, the question typically then is, well, okay, brilliant. How are you going to do it? Well, we're going to hire more people, right? Okay, but your volume, your EBITDA value won't increase if your operational cost goes at the same level. So, right, CIO, CTO, probably with the COO as well, I would say. How are we going to be more operationally efficient in order that we can use technology to do what technology is built to do and get the humans to do what the humans are built to do?
Are you finding that people are willing to adopt new technologies and willing to go to that digital view of life? Or is that, you raised there that, this industry has been around for 350 years. Obviously, we haven't. We're not that old. But are people changing in the way that they're using that type of technology? Or are people still hoping to do the way they've done? Or is it slowly starting to move?
I'll go first there, Pete, if you don't mind. So look, I think that pendulum is swinging. It's a challenging one, right? Because change is hard. And if you've done what you've done for many years, actually adopting technology, and these, especially the practitioners, are brilliant at what they do. Absolutely. I wouldn't have a job, frankly, if they weren't as good as what they are. So, so therefore change is hard. So we got to get on the boat with them. We got to understand the business at a detail level so that we can then add value. We can be the enabler to help them. And traditionally, there's been resistance. Culture in the market is been an issue for a while, but it's I think the pendulum is definitely swinging. We as organizations and senior leaders recognize that what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing you did yesterday and expecting different results tomorrow. So I'm certainly having way more conversations with senior business unit leads that bring in, millions of revenue that says, how can we be better? How can we be better? How can we be more efficient? Actually, even coming to me sometimes. I've just started a new job, so I've got to start again as such. But sometimes I still get can we go buy that? Or we bought it. Can we plug it in? No. But nonetheless, actually, I encourage the fact that where's the ideas, where's the opportunity? And yes, there's a process. Pete touched on it, right? Part of our jobs actually is the infrastructure, the network, the integration, the security bit, sort of the unsexy parts that sometimes our business unit heads don't necessarily focus on. But nonetheless, right, there's still enablement in all of that. But back to your original question, the pendulum is definitely swinging. And in a way, it's a bit of survival of the fittest. You don't have to be the fastest, as the bear analogy goes, right? But I don't want to be the slowest.
Say with changing in technology, is it the changing in people that are helping that change in technology? I suppose is where I would ask that question.
I think, and I've got to stop sort of putting the pandemic out as this shining beacon of hope. It was obviously a global catastrophe, but from a technologist perspective, if you rewind pre-2020, the levels of resistance to change, I think, were exponentially higher to where we are now. I think people, both in their personal lives and in their professional lives, are understanding the value of the technology that they've got, I say, in their hands. I mean, your phone, your iPad, your personal computer at home, it's amazing to think, people in their 60s, 70s that thought that you could do all of your banking or virtually all of your banking on your phone is unthinkable. And I think that demographic shift in the workforce is a big issue too. It's a huge opportunity. We're not allowed to talk about age, are we? But those who are earlier in their careers, as opposed to those who are more senior, are coming into the workplace, and they must on occasions be baffled by some of the legacy applications and legacy approaches to technology that we have traditionally had. And again, I'm going back pre 2020. I think the world has changed, and I think that pace of change is only going to keep accelerating as people with youth on their side are coming into sort of the primes of their career and are really driving it and saying there has to be a better way. I want to drive out more efficiency. I want to drive out to Steve's point earlier. We need to put technology in place that doesn't necessarily, it's not about reducing headcount necessarily, but it's about decoupling revenue growth and your cost base. Simplistically, your people. Can you do more with the same number of people? And if the answer to that is yes, then it's going to be driven by technology being in place that's enabling business to grow in that way.
Yeah, no, completely understand. I'm loath to do it because you're going to give me a load of grief, but I'm going to mention two letters in a second. That if we look at the rest of the market, everything has got AI written all over it as being, the silver bullet that's going to solve the world. Everything and anybody that has got any piece of software has got an AI label just to make it sound as if it's the latest and greatest. I see it every day. I talk to clients about AI every day, and I talk to clients where they say, "I need AI," and I sit there and go, "To do what?" Because it's a technology. It's not the silver bullet everybody necessarily thinks it is. Is it coming into insurance? Or are you seeing the similar sort of view of the overhyping of AI? If that works for you,
I'll go first, Pete. So yeah, Peter definitely buys the beers and is the first person to mention AI. No, look, yes, it is going to change the world, and more so in other industries than others. But nonetheless, it's a fantastic thing, and our jobs as CIOs, CTOs, IT directors is to understand it, is to ensure that we understand some of the, dare I say, the below the desk, the plumbing elements, containerized, hallucinations, guardrails, quality data. Point it at bad data, you'll get bad answers. Point it at good data, you still may not get the answers you want, and that's where humans still play a huge part in my perspective. Look, is it coming into our industry? Yes, it is. Are we using it at Miller? Yes, we are. Is it making a difference? Yes, it is. I very much look at it as what you just mentioned, Peter. Actually, really, what's the problem we're looking to solve? What's the opportunity we're looking to create? It is a tool in the toolkit, and yes, I have had that very conversation as well with regard to, well, AI can solve it. Solve what? Be more specific. Let's get into what you want to do, why, and what are the outcomes you're looking to achieve. The solutioning element, well, that's sort of Peter and my job, really, with strong partnerships, and I'm going to come on to that in a second. But yes, it will make a difference, and it will. I'm conscious of time, but I also have there's a counter to it that we as I guess industry leaders have got to really consider, which is what AI can and will replace is, dare I say, the due diligence, the investigative bit, the go find me this. If I talk about the legal world, for example, paralegals, juniors sent off to investigate files, find me precedents for examples of, and that can take them days, weeks, months, right? AI will do that. Large language models will do that in seconds. But then, the lawyers of today cut their teeth by doing that yesterday and are as skilled and as capable as a result. If we dilute that, what's tomorrow's lawyer going to be like if they haven't cut their teeth in that regard? But that's a different topic. But what I want to come back to, and Pete and I are very passionate about this, is there is a lot of noise. Peter, you touched on it, right? There's a lot of noise out there. A lot of people shoving AI in front of products and services and trying to sell them. So actually, what Pete and I's job is to do in this regard is actually, search through the wheat and the chaff and find who are the partners that we want to talk to, the people that actually understand it, the people that are making a difference, the areas that we could potentially look to do experiments with to see if there are things. And I think that is not just for AI, I think for any technology, I think it's hugely important that you find people that you can work with that will make a difference to your organization, that are in it together, that can appreciate sometimes when mistakes happen and how you solve. But yeah, that it's the partnership piece for me is extremely, extremely important.
And I think that's going back to one of the things you said at the beginning. It's the users that make the difference here, not the technology. So the users have got to be in there to, point things in the right direction. It's not the technology that's going to do that for you. If the user can't find a need, what's the point in a lot of respects, I suppose. Pete, your view?
Yeah, I mean, Steve touched on it there as well. But I think the challenge we've got with AI is it is the tabloid headline at the moment. And I'm going to age us all here, but Y2K, the world was going to end at the millennium for technology. It didn't. Where have we been over the last 25 years? Big data, blockchain, these are all going to change the world. They're going to flip them on the head. Are they part of what we do? Yeah, listen, absolutely. Absolutely. You look at some of the principles of big data, Steve's point there, garbage in, garbage out. If we don't increase the quality of our data, then how can we expect to get better insights at the back end of it? So there's a lot there. But I think the challenge at the moment, particularly for business leaders, is there is so much hype around AI that if you're not doing AI, well, how are you leading your business? How are you possibly making a success? What are your technology leaders doing if they're not doing AI? And I think that comment there around, well, AI is sort of a solution in certain businesses looking for the problem that it's going to fix. But the biggest challenge I think that's becoming prevalent is the tools that are available, readily available. Again, back to people's personal devices. Individuals are bringing their own AI solutions to play at work. And part of, I think, one of our biggest challenges as technology leaders is not being the department that says no, but we do have to make sure that we're keeping, when I say keeping people safe, keeping people, keeping data, keeping systems, keeping our infrastructure safe. So it's thinking about the guardrails that don't prevent people's use of it, but how do we keep them safe whilst they are using it, and taking advantage of what is, a tremendously powerful tool set that really, but not will be, is game changing. It already is game changing. It's interesting people talk about AI in future tense because it's not something that's coming. It's something that's already here, and let's be honest, it's already been here for quite a while. And there are examples of that you can unpick as well. So.
Yeah, you've taken me on to another topic there that I think is really valid, and one that I speak fairly passionate about with all of my clients, which is security. You talk there about shadow IT potentially coming into the workplace, knowing where your data is, knowing where your data is going, and all of these sorts of things. Is that a problem within insurance? Do you see that on a day-to-day basis? Is that something that keeps you awake at night? Pete, do you want to jump in on that?
Oh, certainly. And Steve, having just started with a new company owner, when I started with my previous company, Amwins, back in 2019, that concept of shadow IT or people within the business being attracted by a shiny new toy that somebody promised them was going to fix the world and they went ahead and bought it, and then they just come to you in IT and say, can you just make this happen, please? Despite the fact it doesn't sit with any of your existing infrastructure, it doesn't comply to standards and so on and so forth. And that it's really hard because we want to make sure that people's inspiration, those sparks of genius, aren't put out, but we need to make sure we're having a controlled conversation. And that's, as we mentioned a couple of times, we talk about relationships, we talk about partnership. IT has to be everywhere because we have to be part of those conversations. We need to understand what the problems are, what the opportunities are that the business is trying to solve for, so that we can try and help them do it in the right way. And we don't want to slow it down. We don't want to make it more expensive, but we do have to have that element of control.
Yeah, and that's where I talk about that band analogy, right? So, we're an integral part of the business. And if we can ensure that the conversation is around enablement, not disablement, then we do get there. But sometimes you're on a bit of a journey. I am, as Pete rightly said, here at my new employer. But, we are already experimenting. We are already trying things. We've already launched our own internal version of AI. We were showcasing it a couple of days ago at a major event. It's great. But equally then, it's making certain we're solving, genuine business problems. And yes, look, you talked about data and data usage, data residency, data flow. That's an area, data quality. That's an area that's really, really, really important. And keeping me awake at night. Well, yes, secure information security data. I sleep well at night. I'm knackered every evening now. A new job, right? But nonetheless, no, it's vitally important because understanding how that flows between your own internal sort of systems, if you will, and the external systems you've got, and where that's then being processed. Getting the business to realise, for example, that they own the data, not us, and they're responsible for that data, not us. A classic first line, second line, third line piece. But our job is making certain the tools are right, that we have classified our data correctly. We have ensured that data at rest versus, data and flow is protected, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that therefore means, because there are some regulations out there apparently that ensure that we have a duty to ensure that we are protecting that on behalf of the customer, and rightly so, but no, it is a really important factor. And just to underline what Pete said, we want the business to think entrepreneurially. We want them to try and be creative. I'm going to steal this from my boss who said it the other day, and I thought it was excellent, which was, we need to be a bit brave. We need to take some risks. We need to lean in. We need to be innovative, but we got to do it in a way that's safe, that we can experiment. We can then potentially turn an experiment into a proof of concept, and then we could maybe look to productionize. Those are distinctly different things that mean different ways of approaching them. We're doing one now. I can't say a lot about it, but we are moving a proof of concept, if you will, into productionized capability, which will transform how a particular part of our business. And we're quite excited as to how that can resonate across not just our business, but potentially we could be at the leading edge, maybe bleeding, I don't know, in other areas. But now I'm looking at, well, what does going from a proof of concept to in production look like? What are the risk factors that I need to ensure? What are the security components that I need to consider? Compute power, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and I guess, to just sort of bring this piece to a bit of a conclusion, I think it's really hard for you guys today because you've got so many different areas to consider. If we think, when I started, the internet didn't exist. So security was a whole lot less of an issue than it is today, because everybody can send anything across the world just with a click of a button. Whereas back in the day, that just wasn't a possible thing to do. Whereas today, you've got to think about, where your data is, how that data is used, how, where people can access it from. So there's an awful lot to think about now from a CIO's perspective that you probably never needed to think about in the past. And the more that the technology increases, the more the demands on you to know, what's my view on this? Where's that going to impact my strategy? So that strategy piece that you all need to create, I think is really, really important. And being on top of that, I think, is a really tough job.
Yeah, but if you break that down a bit, thank you, and please have a chat with my boss as regards to how difficult my job is. Be very grateful. Look, you're absolutely right, Peter. But if I take a step back from that and look at a number of things I just scribbled down here, so information security and protecting your data, your capabilities. There are some areas that through your risk appetite and tolerance, that there'll be crown jewels that you really gold plate, copper bottom in terms of protection. There are others that maybe not so much, but nonetheless, layers I've always thought in terms of information security. Again, back to, you don't have to be necessarily the strongest, but you cannot be the weakest. So what are the layers of protection that you have got? Segmenting your network. So that's the classic, if they do get in, how are you stopping them spread? So bit 101 for our listeners, no doubt. Well, actually, when someone says, yeah, let's segment our network, that's a really hard thing to do. But actually, there's a lot of value out of it. Disaster recovery, backups, etc. The one thing that, and Pete and I have been experiencing this when there was a major incident at Lloyd's a couple of years ago. But practice. I'm a huge advocate of practicing, so that it's not a case of how big the wall you build, how wide it is, how deep it is. They'll find a way through. So think when, not if. And practice internally with regard to your major incident plan, and then do some red team exercises so that everyone knows what they need to do, when they need to do it, how they need to do it. And again, that's back to partnerships as well. Yes, we are in a crazy world at the moment. And I'm afraid that's a real prevalent thing, especially in financial services and especially in insurance. My industry, we're predominantly a wholesale broker. So yes, we're not giving any secrets away, but we deal with significant sums of money. So if I were an outsider thinking about who I'd like to have a go at, I'd like to go at someone that's dealing with big financial transactions.
Hopefully, we've not put any ideas in anybody's head by that statement.
No, but then anyway, I'm sure these individuals do their research and they know already. But nonetheless, it's back to the point. Therefore, and actually, what I've been encouraged, and sorry if I'm waffling a bit, but I've been encouraged. The board take information security and risk really seriously. I'm already in front of our board. I'm already in front of our executive and non-executive directors with regard to what are we doing? Where are we? How safe are we? Well, you're never safe, but how robust are we? And what's our North Star, and how are we continually improving? Because you are always having to continually improve in this space.
100%. And, I think, the onion, as I call it, having many layers around your security where your data sits in the middle of the onion is an analogy I've used for many, many years. And I think it's still appropriate today, and it always will be appropriate. It's some of those basic things that we did back in the day, still very much appropriate, even though the complexities it ramped up significantly. Very much the basics will always do you well. Pete, in terms of sleeping at night, do you sleep well at night?
Yes, but I think yes, but it's a classic way of answering the question, isn't it? I think the key point is really interesting. So from us as technology professionals, it's nerve-wracking. It's a huge area of focus. Okay, because if you get it wrong, if you leave something exposed, if you haven't reviewed something, assessed something, updated something, upgraded something, made sure everybody's got MFA turned on. I mean, there's a multitude of different aspects that you've got to make sure you're covering off. But we're thinking about this day in, day out. We have knowledge. We have great people that work with us. The bit that I find really interesting, and it is culturally really important, I think, for successful organizations going forward, is, Steve just referencing there, he's getting in front of people and he's having the conversations. Okay, that's great. But having those red team exercises, having those real world scenarios, and it's not just technology. Yes, the buck stops with us, but actually, how do you engage with group legal? How do you engage with the business leaders, the CEO, the chairman, the non-exec? How do you let them know what's happening, and how do you keep them reassured? Because if it's nerve-wracking for us, let's be honest, it's got to be mildly terrifying for those guys and girls, because it's not their area of expertise. This is not what they do day in, day out. And we'll be using terminology and threat vectors and all the sort of language that is second nature to us, that is not completely alien, but they're not confident, they're not comfortable with it. So that's a really interesting challenge, I think, in terms of how you respond. And Steve referenced the Lloyd's incident. What was interesting there and insightful, I think, for a lot of organizations was how underprepared as a market we were to handle something like that. I think internally within an organization, potentially within a cluster of organizations, you can have sensible conversations. But when something happens that's wider than that, that's bigger than that, that's a really big challenge. I think something that throughout the London market, we need to be thinking about. And it's not just sort of having seminars and workshop sessions. It's actually thinking, as an industry, how do we replicate some of this? Because as the softer targets get saturated out there in the market, whether it's people going after crypto scams or going after OAPs or whatever the soft target is that the bad actors are going after, as those get harder and harder, there's a lot of money being transferred, through the risk transfer process within the insurance market. Huge sums of money. I don't think we're the easiest target. I don't think we're the largest target. There are other jewels. There are vast amounts of money in banking, for example, that have been targeted for much longer than us. But I think at some point, the focus is going to come from the bad actors onto us. And it's ironic, actually, the conversation we're having about AI earlier. The bad actors aren't asking the question about using AI. They have been using it, and they're using it to devastating effect already. Because it makes them much smarter. A lot of the scams historically used to be very crude, very unsophisticated. You could see through them straight away. Well, actually deploying some simple AI tools, that they've accelerated. I'd argue they've accelerated past the rest of the market, because they just were more aggressive about using it. And we're failing fast, because what's the problem? You try and extort some money from somebody and it doesn't work. Okay, I'll move on and I'll try the next target. It doesn't. There's no negative consequences for the bad actors. They just keep going and keep going and keep going. And we could get into a whole fear mongering scenario here, and this is not about saying we're all doomed and all of the companies and our clients' monies are at risk. I mean, I guess fundamentally there is an element of risk, but that's what we do. That's what we manage. And that's, a lot of thought goes in. We talk about the onion analogy or rings of security. This doesn't just happen overnight. This is a process that's evolved over years. And I think that certainly the organizations that I've worked for have made strides in the time that I've been there. And I look back to, 15, 20 years ago, Peter, to your point about not having the internet, 15, 20 years ago, it really wasn't a focus. And I know when you were coming into sort of board pitches to say we need to go and spend X on this cybersecurity tool, you got looked at like you had two heads. Why on earth would you waste that money? What's great, I think, is leadership companies have moved forward, have moved on, and they do understand and do have appreciation for back to where I started with this, though. There is that this is what we do. Actually, for the business leaders, this is really hard.
And I think both of you have flagged it, that what we do is a team sport. Obviously, as CIOs, you are, you're leading that charge, if you like, but it is a team sport. And, things are so complex these days that you've got to do it as a team rather than an individual. It's just not really achievable as an individual, but you having that fantastic set of guitarists or keyboard players or whatever it is, backing singers, going back to that analogy, without those, it's a very different. It would be almost an impossible job without that backroom capability. Now, I'm going to ask. You probably knew I was going to ask you this. Let's look to the future. Let's think about, not the next big thing necessarily, but in 12 months' time, you're speaking to your CEO around, insurance capabilities, your technology stack within your organization. What is the thing that you're going into that boardroom to talk about that potentially he's seeing you with two heads, but actually it's forward thinking and it's something that's going to take your organization on a journey? Paint a little bit of a picture of where do we think things are going?
Oh, okay. 12 months time. I'm still there, hopefully. No, look, our company, and it's well known, so is certainly on the up. We've grown exponentially in the last few years, and we'll continue to grow. So I guess my job in the next 12 months is really foresight and looking around corners around the so what to that. So if we are targeting, which I know we are, to be around a 30% bigger than what we are today, what does that mean in terms of our footprint? What does that mean in terms of our headcount? What does that mean in terms of our distribution, if you will? And as a result, what capabilities have we got today? Are they robust enough to scale in that regard beyond those 12 months as well? And that's the tough thing with regard to back to how hard our jobs are, right? But when you are sometimes, and thankfully I don't work for a company that thinks this, but nonetheless my job is to put the so what around it. Is if we bought something to deliver and to do something yesterday, it might not be good enough or robust enough in order to handle what we are now that we're 30, 40, 50, 60% bigger. And that's always an interesting one around the investment side of things. Are we done now? No. We're done if maybe we stand still, but we're not standing still. So I don't necessarily subscribe to the you're never done and the money will never stop. You have to contextualize that and align it to, well, we were this big now with that footprint and that distribution. We're now looking to be that big and we will aspire to be that big. My CFO said to me the other day, Steve, in the next 10 to 15 years, we want to be £1 billion EBITDA value, right? That's, I won't give our current numbers away, but that's significant. So how do we build to build was his question. And it's brilliant, right? So it's in 12 months time. We've increased our maturity in a number of areas that I'm accountable for: IT ops, service delivery, service desk, data, infosec, delivery, engineering. How are we set up to grow? As we said right at the top of the call, Pete outlined it really well. We can't, it's future cost avoidance. So how can we do more business with the same that we've got today? And that might be distributed differently as well. It's a tough topic, but nonetheless, it's a topic that's prevalent. That how do we look at our operational costs and be more efficient around that? So it is, yes, focused on future cost avoidance, but there might be an element of cost takeout as well. It's just grown-ups have to deal with it in business. Well, I'm afraid. Yeah, I think that's probably enough from me.
Okay, Pete.
I think we both touched on it from yes, we are technologists at the end of the day, but actually people are really what makes our functions tick, makes our industry tick. And I think the big challenge we're going to have is the cultural shift. So maintaining the positive aspects of the culture that we've got in the organizations that we're working with, but actually the world is changing. The macro geopolitical landscape is changing. The requirements, the desires, the working habits of new entrants into the work market are different. And I think that acceleration, I look at my kids are teenagers, and I look at that and think, what's the workplace that they're going to be going into in 5-10 years time? It's going to look wildly different to certainly from where we started, because even now we draw a line in the sand. It's going to be a very, very different place. So I think our biggest challenge is potentially going to be keeping up with the kids. But what do they want? What do they need? What's going to keep them in work? Because we are all advocates of the fact the insurance industry is a great place to work. It's a great place to learn. I think it's got so much to offer, and doesn't necessarily have some of the downsides, some of the prohibitive working patterns in whether it's banking or legal, or there are lots of areas where there's big downsides. I think insurance has got a good mix, you could advocate for people coming into the insurance industry because it does offer you a work-life balance. It does offer you good rewards. Work hard, you'll be rewarded. But I think from a technology perspective, what that looks like for us in the next, let's say the next 2 decades, I think the question of the next 12 months is interesting because I don't think necessarily, I think we're still going to be answering or trying to answer the AI headline in 12 months' time. I think that'll be one of the big, AI, cybersecurity will be the big topics I think we're still talking about, as well as automation, data. We could go on and on that. But I think if you're looking longer term, 5, 10, 15 years, our industry is going to have to change. We've been grappling with it for, well, let's be honest, in various iterations. Lloyd's have been trying to grapple with the modernization at Lloyd's for as long as I can remember, certainly 15, 20 years. And it's not easy, but there is an acknowledgement, there's an acceptance it's going to have to change. It's going to have to drag itself forward into a new evolution, into a slicker, smarter, more automated way of operating and way of working. And that's going full circle on this piece. It's about people, because there are new people coming in. There will also be people just naturally coming to the end of their careers who will no longer be part of that equation because they're retiring. So the overall workforce is going to change, and therefore I think the technology that's going to have to support that workforce is also going to have to change, and the way that we work is going to continue to evolve.
I think that's potentially a fantastic place to close this session, talking about people and for a technology podcast, actually coming down to actually the individuals and the people that make up the businesses, I think is a great place to finish. And I think it's it shows that it's not just about the technology; it is about the people. It's about the knowledge that the people have that can take a business forward and make that business successful and work. So it's not just all about technology. It is using technology with the right people to gain that advantage. Thank you very much, both of you. Hopefully you've enjoyed that. I will buy you beers for mentioning AI when I next see you. But thank you very much, and thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thanks.